Bob Ross has become the most famous artist in the world. From his original fame in the 80s and 90s to his TV show The Joy of Painting's resurgence in 2020, Bob Ross is a name known around the world. His calm demeanor and insistence for happy trees sets him apart from the chaos of the world, and Bob Ross will go down in art history as the kind, lovable painter on TV. But what about his history? What is the story behind this prolific painter? Hi, hello everyone, and welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about Bob Ross. I'm sure all of you know who Bob Ross is. I mean, come on, it's Bob Ross. The only ones who don't know who Bob Ross is either haven't been born yet or are actually insane, or have some really sad disease that affects their memory. But other than that, everybody knows who Bob Ross is, pretty much. I vividly remember the first time I ever watched Bob Ross was on this cute little princess TV that I had when I was little, and I would watch reruns of his show whenever I could until I didn't have that TV anymore. But I'm pretty sure that's where my love and appreciation of art started, and he was a very calm presence in my life at the time. And I know that's the same for a lot of people. Like I said in the intro, Bob Ross had a bit of a resurgence in 2020 during the event that shall not be named. And I think that's because Bob creates a very calming environment, and that was very needed at the time. He also teaches you how to paint, so that can help you through rough times as well, so it's kind of like a win-win situation, sort of. So obviously, Bob Ross is a very influential guy, and with his affluence and my personal appreciation for him, I wanted to know more about his life story. So I did some digging, and here is the story of Bob Ross and the joy of painting. Before we really get into it, I do want to mention that there is a Netflix documentary that came out in 2021 about Bob that I highly recommend you go watch. Mainly because it's really good, but also because there are details about Bob's life in there that I'm not going to mention in this video because I don't want to get sued. So go check it out, preferably after you watch this video, and let's get started. Robert Norman Ross was born on October 29th, 1982 in Daytona Beach, Florida to his father Jack Ross and his mother Ollie Ross. Jack was a carpenter and Ollie was a waitress, and later on in life Bob would work alongside his father until he joined the military. Bob also had a half-brother named Jimmy, but not much is known about him, so he doesn't really come up until the end. As a kid, Bob would regularly take care of injured animals, something that he also did in his adult life, and sometimes the animals he saved would get featured in paintings that he would do on his show. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade and worked with his father in carpentry until he turned 18 in 1961 and joined the Air Force. In the military, he worked as a medical records technician and eventually rose to the rank of Master Sergeant. Not long after he enlisted, he met his first wife, Vicky, and they got married in 1965, right before Bob got sent to work at the clinic in Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. They had a son together named Steve, and unfortunately got divorced in 1977. Not much is known about Vicky, but she did say that Bob would often paint for hours at a time and that he loved being out in nature. And throughout the episodes of Joy of Painting, Bob says a lot of his work is inspired by his time in Alaska. After 12 years spent living in Alaska, the military moved Bob and his son to Washington, where he met his second wife, Jane, who was a secretary at the Air Force Base nearby. He retired from the military in 1981 after 20 years of service with the intention of pursuing a career in art. He moved back to Florida and studied under the German painter William Alexander. William Alexander was an oil painter who used the wet-on-wet technique, or alla prima technique, to quickly create paintings without having to let the oil paint dry in between layers. And as far as I understand, it's done by having a thin coat of thick paint down on the canvas first, and then working on top of that with increasingly thinner coats of paint, because the thinner paint will stick to the thicker paint, if that makes any sense. This was a technique that was first used in the 15th century when painting fabric and hair to give it more movement, and it is also commonly used in Impressionism painting as well. William had a similar TV show to Bob's show called The Magic of Oil Painting, and that's where Bob first saw him paint using this technique. And eventually, after training under him for a while, Bob joined Alexander's company as a tutor and traveling salesman. During his career working for Alexander, Bob met Annette Kowalski when she attended one of his painting classes while she was working through the loss of her son. Through that, they would become friends, and soon after, Annette and her husband would encourage Bob to go out on his own and start his own business. And Annette and Walter Kowalski would go into business with Bob and Jane Ross. Bob and Annette would travel around for Bob's art classes and art shows, while Walter and Jane would handle all of the administrative work. And in 1982, a TV station in Virginia aired a taping of his art class as a pilot, and within the first year, over 60 PBS stations would sign up to air The Joy of Painting. A year later, in 1983, Bob would move to Muncie, Indiana, because a PBS station offered him a studio to film the show in. He would film 3 episodes a day, and at first, Bob would have a copy of the painting off to the side to use as a reference during the show, but as time went on, he would just paint directly from his head. He would also do a more detailed version of each painting after filming that would be for his books. So there are 3 copies for most of the pieces that you see in episodes of The Joy of Painting. And Bob truly believed that anyone could paint, and all he wanted to do was teach people how to paint. If there was one famous person that 100% wasn't in it for the money, it was Bob Ross. As Bob got more popular, they started to sell Bob Ross branded products, and while the Kowalskis wanted to make more of a profit off of the products, Bob refused to let them skimp on quality. He didn't want to have bad products with his name on them, especially since the alla prima technique requires a very specific texture of paint to work. In 1989, Bob would move back to Florida from Indiana, but every 3 months he would make a trip back to Muncie to film more episodes of the show. During this time, Bob's wife Jane was sadly diagnosed with cancer and passed away in 1992. Jane's death hit Bob really hard, and not long afterwards, Bob was diagnosed with cancer himself. He was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and his diagnosis is said to have been caused by either the amounts of paint thinner he was exposed to, or the fact that he was a smoker for most of his adult life. After Jane had passed, Annette and Walter Kowalski started to take more control in the company, and once it was discovered there was no hope of Bob recovering, they fought to get the rights to his name and likeness, which he had signed to his son and half-brother Jimmy. Bob's diagnosis was only shared amongst his close friends and family, but during the later episodes of The Joy of Painting, he was suffering from cancer. The show aired from July 11th, 1983 to May 17th, 1994. And on July 4th, 1995, at the age of 52, Robert Norman Ross passed away. And just like with his diagnosis, the news of his death wasn't shared with the public either. All of the rights to his name and likeness were signed off to his son Steve and his half-brother Jimmy, but due to some legal trouble, Jimmy, who held the majority of the rights to Bob's name, signed them off to the Kowalskis, and they still hold them to this day. In his lifetime, Bob painted an estimated 30,000 paintings, but despite their abundance, they are scarce in the art market. The ones that circulate among collectors are mainly the ones he did before the show started, and currently, if you find a piece that you think is a Bob Ross original, Annette Kowalski is the only person who is qualified to authenticate his original paintings. The Joy of Painting continues to bring joy to people all over the world, and Bob Ross is a name that just about everybody knows, and his legacy is one of kindness, which I think is the best memory that anybody can leave behind. Bob Ross was truly just a good guy. Like, the way he acted on TV was pretty much how he acted in real life. He was just a chill dude. If you watch the documentary, there's a lot more drama, which I personally enjoyed a lot, but I really wanted this video to be about his journey with art through his life and less the drama that happened at the end of it. But if you want the drama, then go check out the documentary still. It's really good. But what was your first experience with Bob Ross? Did you get introduced to him via the show? Did you know somebody who took a class? I feel like a lot of people just watched the show, considering he died in the 90s. At least, like, my generation wouldn't have had any personal interactions with him. But if you did, I would love to hear about it. Like, if you actually met Bob Ross, that'd be so cool. So please share all of your Bob Ross stories. If you have a favorite episode of The Joy of Painting, I would love to hear that. Or, like, if you have a favorite quote of his. I don't know a lot of Bob Ross quotes. Like, the episode that I watched to follow along for the painting in this video was the first episode I watched in years. And it was really good, and it was the first episode of The Joy of Painting. And now I really want to go through and watch every single one, but I feel like if I watch every single one, I'd also want to paint every single one, which I'm honestly kind of thinking about doing. I think it'd be really cool to just paint every single Bob Ross painting, but that would be insane to make, like, what is it, like there's 400 something episodes? That'd be 400 paintings. I could just make them tiny. I could do 400 tiny Bob Ross paintings. I don't know, would you guys like to see a video where I paint every single Bob Ross painting, but like a small version? Because I think that'd be pretty cool. Honestly, I'll probably end up making it anyways, regardless of whether anybody wants to see it or not, because this is my channel, and I can do what I want. I'm probably going to end up painting every single Bob Ross painting, but we'll see. Maybe after I go to sleep, because it's 12 a.m. right now, maybe there will be a moment of clarity. Maybe there will not be. Maybe this is the moment of clarity that I'm having right now that's telling me I should paint every Bob Ross painting. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed it and want to see more, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss out on my next post. And I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!